Last night was another relatively clear night outside in the Bay Area, so I got the telescope out and set up. There was definitely haze, and the city light was making it a little bit difficult to see things super precise, but that's kind of normal for the area. I started out by checking out some just visual observing down in the south east where that little gap of trees was, and then switched over to drawing Messier 3. Thought today I would, uh, create a little circle using a kitchen bowl just to frame the object. It was really big in my at 8 millimeters, 150 times zoom in the batter 8 to 24. Um, so it was nice. It took up a big part of the framing. I think that when I ended up sketching it out here, it ended up being a little bit bigger than it actually was in relationship to the circle, but not by a whole lot. So I'm going to be switching back and forth a little bit between standard speed, like this right here for the drawing, just so it's a little easier to see the technique, and sped up things for time's sake for the most part, just so you don't have to sit through tons and tons of, you know, boring stuff. Overall, I think the footage or the sketching session was maybe about 35 minutes real time. So in this opening section, I'm really just focusing on creating the overall shape of the brightness of the cluster, and to get a definition of where kind of the brightest points are as well. I'm trying to go extremely light with the pencil, the General's charcoal here, so that I don't create any lines that I can't smudge out, to give that nice smoothness. I think, I definitely want to try out some other techniques using some more powdered charcoal and a brush type technique. I just have, I find that this makes it a little bit more stable in the sketchbook since I'm opening and closing it all the time. Even with the spray fixative that I put on at the end, I feel like it's a little, there could be some rubbing, of the drawings onto the other page, and this helps kind of solidify it just a little bit. So going back into high speed here, just to kind of get through the rest of the layers. But basically it's just kind of multiple layers and building it up, trying to to find that shape, and using the kind of residue of the whiteness on the smudge tool to kind of give that softness of the outer edges as much as I can. Once that's in a pretty good spot, then it's time to kind of like mark out some of the areas that are a little bit darker. I do this with an eraser usually as a starting point, just to slow the footage back down to normal speed so you can get a sense of it. It really is just sort of like observing at the eyepiece, finding where those dark areas are. Sometimes I feel like these things are actually in the nebula, but I also kind of feel like maybe this is more of a just your eye doing things. But regardless, personally, I really enjoy just sort of duplicating exactly what I see in the eyepiece. So after that's in, I'll just take the smudge tool. Oh, what am I? Where am I going with this? I think I'm doing a little more observing just to double check things, and adding a little extra of that stray light detail. There we go. And then using the smudge tool, I'll kind of just soften everything out. It takes a little bit of those hard edges off of all the eraser marks and blends everything together just a little bit. From here, the star placement, it's all pretty standard stuff. We'll just continue with the high speed through here. I'm using, again, the Brisk 0.8 gel pen. One interesting thing that I found is that because these Brisk pens only come in a set, which is kind of annoying because I actually only use like the 0.8 and the 0.5. This is the 0.5. I only really use the 0.5 and the 0.7. But I have found that since they're identical pens, you can unscrew the tip and take the gel ink out of the other pens and then replace them. So this one actually is coming to the point five is coming to the end in terms of the gel in there. So right after the session, I took my 1.2, I think, which had a weird nib. It wasn't working. I couldn't draw with it. Took that apart and then just put the gel tube from that into this one. So effectively just, extending the life, doubling the life of it. Doing a little bit more observing there before getting it back into some of the stars. You'll notice that a lot of times I'll just take these kind of pauses where I'm not drawing, and that's usually where I'm just staring through the eyepiece for a while. Now, switching back to regular speed here, I just wanted to kind of go through a little bit of the specifics of the smaller dot placement. The beginning of the night here while I was drawing, the visibility wasn't super great, so a lot of the specific little dots of light in the stars of this cluster were just coming out as a smudge in the eyepiece. But I was going based off of where I'm placing these is based off of sort of the brightest areas within that globular center, just to try and give the sense of where the structure is. And in the beginning, it felt to me like there were these kind of two masses above and below, and they were connected on the like kind of lower left area through there. So speeding it back up now, I'm just continuing to make all these tiny little dots to just create that mass. And referring back to the eyepiece regularly just to make sure that the shaping feels about right. Yeah, the longer session here, just looking through the eyepiece for a while before getting into some of the other details. I think I was double checking kind of the overall shaping. Now I'm trying to sort of broaden it out to sort of the maximum of where I see kind of the brightest core is. Still using that brisk 0.5. Now, these are all fairly arbitrary in terms of the placement of it. I'm not obviously like hitting exactly where any of these stars are, but it's about creating that general sense of shape through there. A lot of referring back, I just spread it out based on off of sort of where I saw things. Turning off the light for a little bit just so I can get some of that night vision back and see those dots a little bit better. I think it was right around this point in the night, maybe a little bit later, where the seeing got considerably better and I could actually make out maybe a good, into the hundreds of the specific little dots, which was excellent. M3 was almost exactly at zenith throughout this whole observing session, which was interesting because, I had to move the telescope a little bit funkily. It took me a few more minutes to try and get it into perfect view from time to time. I've switched over now to something that I've been experimenting a lot with, which is this Faber-Castell um, white ink brush pen. And it's not really because of the brush that I'm using it, but I like it because it creates a much softer dot. It's like a half opacity type thing, which gives the stars a sense that like they're receded back a little bit within space, a little bit of a darker um, pinpoint. It does end up having a little bit of a blue hue. I think that the blueness is actually coming out a little bit stronger in the video than it does in real life, um, which I don't totally like because it's a little bit different than everything else. Um, but it actually does kind of make sense for a lot of the stuff that I've been seeing through the eyepiece, where in general, most of the stars are a little bit more in that blue tint, especially with these globulars. I'm still looking for other options in terms of a kind of like a half opacity type thing. This pen works pretty well, but I find that the brush, you have to be pretty darn precise to get those pinpoint dots, and it would be nice, especially when you're kind of like tired in the middle of the night, to have something that was a little bit more forgiving, I guess. There are a couple sketches that I've done with this that have turned out pretty funky because I'm just pushing too hard and the stars come out a little bit too thick. So after laying in kind of where I felt like the stars were all placed, I'm just adding a little bit of the extra overall surrounding glow. Again, super light strokes through there. Oh yeah, I should mention too, that streak on the right, as I was looking through the eyepiece, I saw a meteor shoot by, and it was this tiny little one. It appeared and disappeared all within the eyepiece, which was kind of shocking to me, so I decided to draw it in. So this pencil here is just a color blue one. You can't really make out the color. It's much more pale in real life underneath regular light. Um, but I've been also experimenting with just kind of very lightly adding some color to the white, because the white, isn't totally representational of what I feel like I'm seeing. And then I'm going in and kind of double hitting some of the brighter spots just to bring down their intensity and to add a little bit of extra blue um, to them. This actually has the added benefit of just matching a little bit of that brush pen color as well. And I find that it really helps almost like create a little contrast or something. So right now I'm bringing the sketchbook up closer to the eyepiece so that I can more easily compare between the image I'm seeing through the eyepiece and the sketchbook, kind of looking back and forth with the two eyes to just double check scale and size and relationship. And what I noticed in that one was a couple of extra stars, but then also that there were these kind of sections that felt like they were like arms, almost tendrils that come out. And so I added a little bit to that bottom right area to give that sense that it was kind of like just a little bit of stars kind of pulling out through there. I also noticed as it was clearing up a little bit that there was a little bit more variation within some of that cloudiness, and so adding that in with the pencil. At this point, I felt like things were in pretty good shape, so I turned off the light and just took a longer observing session of just kind of staring at it, soaking it in, seeing what I was not seeing with the amber light on, and trying to gauge if there's anything else to add. I think overall it felt pretty good. This pencil that I'm using here is a gray one, and it was just sort of to pull down some of the lighting. I think when I was observing, I did notice that like it felt to me like there were areas that just it was overall like a little too evenly bright. So I wanted to dim that down a little bit. Took another couple minutes here to readjust, double check, see if that was feeling a little bit better in terms of what I was seeing. And then if we go back to normal speed again here, just to go through adding in a little bit of the subtleties of these kind of like darker there almost felt like lanes that I was seeing. I don't know if this thing actually has them, but I was definitely seeing them. So I wanted to add in that sense of kind of like texture or complexity within. And this is just using a black charcoal pencil, which I find kind of blends a little nicer with the way that the paper looks, and you can kind of draw over it with the ink afterwards if you need to as well. Yeah, so overall, I think that things were looking pretty good. I'm doing some final touches here of just giving a little bit of like fading out to the tail of that meteor. It was really fun to look at that thing shoot through. And then adding a little bit of information at the bottom. I'll probably end up doing more of the detailed notes later, but just wanted to get down the main stuff. I didn't put cardinal directions in because it was almost exactly zenith, and where it was moving out of frame kept changing throughout the night. I probably rotated the telescope like 90 degrees in azimuth throughout the night. And that was it. So overall, I feel like my technique is changing a lot still every day or every time I go out there and draw, but I'm still having a blast doing it every time. And so hopefully that was enjoyable. Is trying to focus a little bit more on um, the specifics of the technique through here. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me a line. All right, cheers, thanks. Clear skies.